It's going to be for that Democratic platform plank that provides decent quality health care.
Ted Kennedy, the last surviving Kennedy brother, was nicknamed the liberal lion of the Senate due to his passionate speaking ability and his influence in the Democratic Party.
The work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die.
The man very well could have been president in his own right if it wasn't for, well...
Oh, was that Chappaquiddick? The girl, Teddy Kennedy, the bridge, the car. I played a major role.
Although he never would win the presidency, Ted Kennedy was arguably the most famous senator in the country for decades, representing notoriously liberal Massachusetts for most of his life. But in 2009, in the middle of the country's biggest healthcare push in over 40 years, Kennedy died from brain cancer, leaving this legendary Senate seat open for the first time since 1962. In a state that voted for Obama by over 25%, the special election to replace Kennedy was a slam dunk for Democrats. Or was it? $60. That's the magic number in the Senate. If you have 60 out of 100 senators in support of something, it'll pass. But accomplishing this is very difficult since you almost always can't reach this magic number without senators from both parties. But amazingly enough, after the 2008 wave election, the Democrats had exactly 60 senators in their caucus, also known as a supermajority, one that can unilaterally pass major legislation without any Republican votes. This hasn't happened in 30 years. It's very rare in American politics. So the Democrats went big and pushed for a massive healthcare bill, one that, sure enough, would get 0 Republican votes, which was okay for the time being since Kennedy's temporary replacement, Paul Kirk, was a Democrat. A special election was scheduled in 5 months' time to determine who would be the long-term successor to the Senate seat. And Democrats needed to come out on top to preserve their supermajority and therefore the Affordable Care Act. So the pressure was on.
Voters will go to the poll and select a person who may well determine the outcome of the long fight over health care legislation in Washington.
But they weren't too nervous. I mean, this wasn't Florida or Ohio, it was Massachusetts. A state so liberal that only 1 year prior they voted to the left of California. They had a Democratic governor, a Democratic state house, and a Democratic state senate. Not a single county had even voted for a Republican presidential candidate since 1988. Okay, so you get the idea. So as a result, the Democratic candidate, Attorney General Martha Coakley, was confident. With the election only a few weeks away, she was up pretty comfortably in the polls. So she decided to go on a little vacation.
I did take Christmas Day off. I think voters probably didn't want to hear from me on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve.
She hadn't been campaigning all too much anyway, and after all, the real challenge was winning her primary. The general election was the easy part, and like I said, she's up in the polls. But while she was gone, this ad aired over the holidays.
Hands of the consumer and our businessmen will have both immediate and permanent benefits to our economy.
Every dollar released from taxation that is spent or invested will help create a new job and a new salary.
This was Scott Brown, Coakley's Republican opponent, and this ad proved to be a major spark in his campaign. In it, Brown compares himself to JFK in Massachusetts. That's like a SoundCloud rapper comparing himself to Tupac, or when Jesus said that he was the son of God. It's a very risky move. But Coakley didn't immediately hit back against the Kennedy comparison because she was, well, on vacation. So the association stuck in the head of a lot of voters. Scott Brown was one out of only 5 Republicans in the 40-member state Senate. He barnstormed the state with appearance after appearance. He was an absolute money machine, using the power of the internet, radio, and grassroots support to fund his campaign. Unlike some other Tea Party candidates at the time, Brown was careful to come off as moderate and reasonable, not staking out positions that were too extreme for the liberal electorate of Massachusetts.
But you're still pro-choice.
Yes, because I feel this issue is best handled between a woman and her doctor and her family. And on the marriage issue that you brought up, It's settled here in Massachusetts.
He read the very anti-Washington political environment and used it to his advantage, as he painted himself as an outsider who wanted to fight against out-of-control Democratic spending.
The people of Massachusetts are upset at the taxing, the spending, the backroom deals.
That was the case he was making. Oh, and he also wants you to know that he has a truck.
And I drive a truck!
This is my truck. I put a lot of miles on it during this campaign.
I'm Scott Brown. I live in Rentham. I drive a truck.
I love this old truck.
Forget the truck. Everybody can buy a truck.
When he started to criticize my truck, that's where I draw the line.
It's important to know that in Massachusetts, independents outnumber Republicans and Democrats.
51% of those voters in Massachusetts are independent.
And although Massachusetts independents are Democratic-leaning, Brown was beginning to win them over. So Coakley comes back from vacation and finds that in a matter of days, her lead is completely vanished. Thinking, what the heck just happened? Her campaign scrambled for a new strategy. And they decided to go negative on Brown, hoping to tie him to the brand of republicanism that had been so toxic for so many years in her state.
Who is Scott Brown, really?
He calls himself independent, but voted with Republican leadership 96% of the time.
A Republican, in lockstep with Washington Republicans.
No wonder Brown's campaign is being supported by the same extremist group that backs Sarah Palin. Martha Coakley for Senate, Massachusetts values.
But her attacks didn't seem to be working.
I grew up Democrat, so did my family. I vote for the candidate, I don't vote for the party. And Scott Brown is a man of the people, and that's why we're voting for Scott Brown.
My kids live here, I'll die here, and I'll die fighting for Scott Brown.
They were still tied, and if anything, Brown now had a slight lead. This is probably because, first off, she couldn't really find any decent dirt on the guy. I mean, we all learned that he posed nude for Cosmo in the 80s for their Sexiest Man in America spread. Maybe that would have hurt the bacon-wrapped Brown if this race was in Alabama, but not in Massachusetts. So nothing she said really stuck. The truth was, Brown had a great story. He grew up in poverty.
How many different houses when you were growing up?
It was within the first 18 years, it was 17 different moves, 12 separate houses, and that doesn't count the times I ran away.
And he suffered physical abuse from different stepfathers growing up.
Yeah, he was a truck driver, hot-tempered. I remember him being a pretty good drinker.
But he pulled himself up. He joined the Army National Guard. He used a modeling career to pay his way through law school and rose up the ranks of public service. So as a result, the attacks just made the Coakley campaign seem desperate. If you're confident in your position, you don't go negative. After all, you never see Coke criticizing Pepsi or McDonald's going after Burger King. It also didn't help matters when one Coakley ad used footage of the World Trade Center when trying to tie Brown to Wall Street greed and corruption. On top of that, Coakley was proving to just be a flat-out bad campaigner. She didn't put as much effort in as Brown, that was clear. She made only 19 campaign appearances compared to Brown's 66. But she also seemed out of touch with the everyday people of her state. When asked about her lack of campaign appearances, she said, as opposed to standing outside Fenway Park in the cold, shaking hands, yeah. Also, famed Red Sox pitcher Curt Schilling criticized Coakley, and she absolutely whiffed in her response.
Yeah, but now Scott Brown is Curt Schilling, okay?
And another Yankee fan.
Schilling?
Yes.
Curt Schilling, a Yankee fan?
No. All right, I'm wrong on my...
The Red Sox great pitcher of the bloody sock?
Well, he's not there anymore.
Coakley claims that she was kidding, but regardless, the exchange was just so weird.
I can be funny, believe it or not, even though most people don't think
they're
that.
Laughing.
And they're laughing.
She wasn't recognizing that the things that she thought were her strengths, years in government, strong ties to the Democratic Party, and very liberal positions, were now weaknesses in the year of the Tea Party. She supported Obama's agenda, including the stimulus, cap and trade, and the healthcare bill.
I'd be proud to be the 60th vote to make sure that we get healthcare reform that we so badly need.
And assumed that since the state had supported this agenda in previous years, they would have the same appetite now. But that was turning out not to be true. In 2008, she might have cruised to victory, but not in 2010. And finally, there was this moment during their last debate.
Are you willing under those circumstances to say, I'm going to be the person? I'm going to sit in Teddy Kennedy's seat and I'm going to be the person who's going to block it for another 15 years.
Well, with all due respect, it's not the Kennedy seat, and it's not the Democrat seat, it's the people's seat.
The term "the people's seat" became an unofficial slogan for the Brown campaign in the closing days.
It's the people's seat, it's not the Kennedy seat. To watch the news and to hear everybody say how it belongs to the Democrats, it's just not true.
And as Election Day approached, the suddenly close campaign caught the eye of national Republicans, which was a complete 180 from the start of the race, where they wrote Brown off completely and didn't even fund any of his campaign. Rudy Giuliani, John McCain, and other national Republicans all stumped for Brown.
I'm proud to endorse Scott Brown for the Senate.
National Democrats, realizing that the race was slipping away from them, desperately tried to rally support for Coakley at the last minute. Obama had a rally in the state, basically pleading for them to elect Coakley and not tank his agenda.
If you were fired up in the last election, I need you more fired up in this election.
Election Day came and turnout was high for a January special election, as the eyes of the whole nation were on Massachusetts. And the result wasn't even that close, as Brown won by nearly 5%, capping off a remarkable campaign.
Our two lovely daughters, so I want to thank Ayla and Ariana for their help as well. And just in case anybody who's watching throughout the country, yes, they're both available. Only kidding, only kidding. Ariana definitely is not available, but Ayla is. I can see I'm going to get in trouble when I get home.
I mean, just 20 days prior, Coakley was up double digits. It's just insane how quickly everything had changed. The election was a gut punch for Obama and the Democrats, and an absolute embarrassment. Even at the end of his presidency, Obama still held anger toward Coakley. Democrats knew their agenda must have been very unpopular for them to lose in such a blue state. Or was it just because Coakley was a bad candidate? Who's to say? Definitely a mixture of both, but the most clear-eyed in Washington knew that this was a harbinger of things to come in November. I know. You all want to know what happened next, right? What happened with the healthcare bill? What's Scott Brown and Martha Coakley up to now? Well, Democrats hit the panic button the day after the special election. Many declared the bill dead, and many Democrats in swing districts feared for their political lives, as the environment was clearly not in their favor, and the midterms were less than a year away. Still, Obama and the Democrats decided to push forward on their healthcare bill, figuring out a workaround by having the House pass a previously passed Senate version of the bill.
Don't walk away from reform. Not now. Not when we are so close. Let us find a way to come together and finish the job for the American people. Let's get it done. Let's get it done.
And then they made some changes around the edges using reconciliation, a process used to pass smaller bills that only requires 50 votes instead of 60. Democrats expectedly got hammered in the midterms. An absolute bloodbath. One that likely would have happened anyway, whether or not Obamacare was passed, just maybe not as bad. Scott Brown was up for a full term only 2 years later, and this time around he drew a strong opponent. Harvard professor and mastermind behind the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Elizabeth Warren. She didn't take the race for granted and did in fact stand outside Fenway in the cold, shaking hands. Although he governed as a true moderate Republican and remained popular, Brown didn't have the benefit of a Republican environment in 2012. Also, he had to contend with a presidential election at the top of the ticket, where Obama won Massachusetts by 23 points. As a result, he lost his seat, only 2 years after his dramatic upset. But both Martha Coakley and Scott Brown's stories weren't over yet, because 2014 would be the year of second chances for both politicians. Coakley ran for governor of Massachusetts, and Brown ran again for the Senate in the neighboring state of New Hampshire. Brown ran against the popular and well-known incumbent, Jeanne Shaheen. But he was once again benefiting from a very favorable Republican environment. And New Hampshire wasn't nearly as Democratic as Massachusetts. In 2014, Republicans would win back control of the U.S. Senate, netting 9 seats in total. Scott Brown would not come along for the ride, though, as he couldn't topple the popular Shaheen. So much for second chances. He went on to be appointed by Trump as ambassador to New Zealand and Samoa. He recently has been talking of a return to politics, maybe New Hampshire's governor's mansion. But what about Coakley?
I can be funny, believe it or not.
She now finally had the opportunity to avenge her humiliating defeat in 2010. She was running against another moderate Republican, Charlie Baker, who was kind of like a Scott Brown 2.0. Just like in 2010, she started off with a strong lead, but this time around, she kept it, beating Baker handily. And in 2018, she cruised to re-election. And now to this day, she remains one of the most popular governors in the country. Ha! Just kidding, idiot.
Good one.
Coakley actually blew her lead once again and lost. Charlie Baker was the one who would win re-election in 2018, while Coakley would go on to become a lobbyist for DraftKings and Juul. So what do you want now, a moral? How about don't go on vacation 20 days from election day? Or don't make 19 campaign appearances when your opponent is making 66.
She didn't go campaigning where she should have. She didn't show the enthusiasm she should have. And I'm sorry I campaigned for her.
Or don't disrespect the Red Sox if you're running in Massachusetts. But in all seriousness, the moral is to not take any win for granted. I don't care how safe you think your seat is, or even if you're running unopposed. You have a responsibility to campaign and connect with your voters, to hear their stories and listen to their needs. Even in a state as democratic as Massachusetts, you can still be vulnerable if you're out of touch with the electorate. And then, you might get called the Bill Buckner of American politics.
Little roller up along first, behind the bag, it gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
And I have to say this, he hit my hands. Nobody has ever hit my hands. I've never heard of this one. Look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it. All right.
Thank you everyone for watching. These videos take about 40 hours to make, so please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, tell me any other elections you'd like to see covered. Thanks again, guys. See you soon with another video.